The quiet evening restaurant was alive with soft music and golden lights. Chandeliers glowed above, casting warm patterns across polished wooden tables. Waiters moved quickly but quietly, carrying trays of steaming food, their white shirts shining in the dim light. Glasses clinked gently, laughter rose in the air, and the smell of roasted chicken and garlic butter filled the room. It was the kind of evening people dreamed of after long days, peaceful, safe, and ordinary. At a small table near the corner sat Daniel, a single dad. His shirt was simple, the collar slightly worn, his hands showing rough skin from years of hard work. He did not look like anyone important, just another tired man enjoying dinner. But across the table sat his world, his little daughter, Emma. Emma's big brown eyes sparkled under the chandelier. She twirled spaghetti round her fork, her cheeks puffing slightly as she ate, then giggled when sauce slipped onto her chin. Daniel reached across the table with a napkin, wiping it away gently. His smile was soft, almost fragile, but it carried the weight of a man who lived for only one reason. Her, Daddy, Emma whispered, leaning close. "This is the best dinner ever." Daniel chuckled, though he knew the truth. The dinner was simple, just pasta and one shared dessert they had promised to split later. But for Emma, it was magic. She didn't see the tired shoes her father wore or the worry lines around his eyes. She only saw love. And Daniel, no matter how much life had taken from him, gave her love in endless amounts. The restaurant around them seemed like another world. At one end, a group of friends celebrated, raising glasses of wine. At another, a couple held hands, whispering with glowing smiles. And in the center of the room, sitting at a large round table, was Mr. Harris, the CEO everyone in the city knew. His suit was sharp, his tie straight, his watch shining with silver. Business partners surrounded him, their laughter louder, their plates filled with the most expensive meals on the menu. People turned their heads. Some even whispered his name, but Mr. Harris did not notice. He was used to being seen, used to being admired, used to power. Daniel noticed, though only for a second. He looked at the CEO, then looked back at Emma. For him, rich men and powerful men were far away, like stars in the sky, bright, but untouchable. He did not envy them. His only treasure sat right in front of him, swinging her feet happily under the table. The music softened as a pianist at the corner pressed gentle keys. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, swaying slightly. "It sounds like a fairy tale," she whispered. Daniel smiled again, but his thoughts were heavy. He wondered how long he could keep giving her small fairy tales when the real world was so hard. He worked 2 jobs, barely making enough. He had no family left, no partner, only this little girl and his promise to protect her with everything he had. And so, in that quiet evening, Daniel let himself believe in peace. He let himself believe that for at least one night, he and Emma could sit among strangers, eat their small meal, and leave with smiles. But sometimes, fate waits until the world feels safe to strike. The door of the restaurant opened with a sharp sound. A rush of cold night air swept in. Daniel barely noticed at first, to focus on Emma's laughter, but others did. Heads turned, voices lowered, forks paused midair. 3 men in dark jackets stepped inside. Their boots hit the floor heavily, and the peaceful music suddenly felt thin and distant. Daniel looked up. Something inside him tensed, though he didn't know why yet. Emma kept eating, unaware, humming to herself. The men walked slowly, their eyes scanning the room with a sharpness that cut through the warm air. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. And then Daniel understood. They weren't there for dinner. The 3 men moved directly toward the center of the room, toward Mr. Harris, the CEO. Their shoulders were broad, their steps quick. One of them shoved a waiter aside without a word. The tray of drinks fell, shattering across the floor. A gasp ran through the restaurant. Emma finally looked up, her fork frozen. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice suddenly small. Daniel reached out, squeezing her hand gently. "It's okay, baby," he said softly, though his own heart was beginning to pound. He looked at the men, then at the CEO, and he knew this peaceful evening was about to break apart. The laughter, the music, the smell of garlic butter, everything beautiful in that moment was about to vanish. And Daniel, an ordinary single father, would soon be forced to reveal the part of himself he had kept hidden for so long. For now, though, he kept his hand steady on Emma's. He told himself he had only one mission: protect her. Whatever storm was about to come, She would not face it alone. The restaurant grew silent, waiting. The men reached the CEO's table. One slammed his hand down, rattling glasses and spilling wine. The music stopped. Every pair of eyes in the restaurant watched with fear, and in that frozen second, before chaos began, Daniel's heart whispered a single thought: this night will change everything. The shadow of Reva's wineglass toppled, red liquid spilling. Across the white tablecloth like a dark stain of blood, the three men stood over Mr. Harris. Their faces cold, their eyes sharp with anger. The CEO's business partners leaned back in shock, some grabbing their jackets, some were frozen to move. The warm, golden light of the restaurant seemed to dim, as though even the chandeliers feared the sudden shadow that had entered the room. The tallest of the three attackers leaned forward, his voice low but heavy with threat. "Mr. Harris," he said, dragging out the name like a curse, "you thought you could walk away. You thought you could ignore us." Double quotes. Mr. Harris stiffened, his lips parting slightly. His hands gripped the table's edge, the silver watch on his wrist trembling in the light. He was powerful in boardrooms, feared in business, but here, cornered under three sets of dark eyes, he looked like any other man. Stripped of his armor, gasps spread across the restaurant as the second man slammed a chair aside. The crash echoed like thunder. A woman cried out, covering her mouth. A waiter stumbled backward, his tray clattering to the floor. Plates shattered, and the room's music stopped completely. Daniel's heart pounded. He had seen danger before in alleys, in the tough parts of life where survival meant standing strong, but this was different. This was chaos dropping like a hammer in a place that had, only minutes ago, been full of laughter. He looked down at Emma, who was still under the table. Her eyes were wide, her little body pressed against her teddy bear. She whispered, "Daddy, what's happening?" Daniel's chest tightened. He stroked her hair gently, forcing a calmness he did not feel. "It's okay, baby," he murmured. "Stay here. Don't move. Daddy's right here." But deep inside, something old stirred within him, something he had buried long ago, the instinct of a man trained not just to survive, but to fight. The tallest attacker grabbed Mr. Harris by the collar, yanking him half out of his chair. "You owe us," the man growled, "and tonight, you pay with money or with blood." Mr. Harris's lips trembled. For the first time in years, the powerful CEO looked helpless. He glanced at his security men, but they stood frozen, their hands shaking, clearly outmatched by the aggression before them. Daniel's fist clenched under the table. He could hear Emma's small breaths. Every fatherly instinct screamed at him to protect her, to shield her eyes from the violence. But another instinct, sharper, darker, told him that if he stayed quiet, things would only get worse. The attackers pulled a knife, its blade catching the chandelier's light. A woman near the bar screamed, covering her child's face. Chairs scraped as people scrambled back, but no one dared to interfere. Fear spread like fire, swallowing courage. Except for Daniel. He rose slowly, his shadow stretching across the floor. He was not tall like the attackers, not dressed in wealth like the CEO. He looked ordinary, just a father in a worn shirt, but his eyes carried something rare, something unshakable. The second attacker noticed him first. "Sit down," he snapped, pointing with the knife. "This isn't your business." Daniel didn't move back. His voice came low, steady. "There's a child in this room," he said, his eyes flicking toward Emma, hidden under the table. "And this now." The men laughed, the sound harsh and cruel. "Look at this hero," the tallest mocked. "A poor man playing guard dog." The knife swung closer to Mr. Harris. His business partners backed away, whispering prayers. The entire restaurant held its breath. Daniel's heart slowed. His eyes scanned the room in a way no one expected. The position of the men, the weight of the wine bottles on the tables, the angle of the chandelier light. Every detail clicked into place inside him like gears turning. He had not used these skills in years, but they were still there, buried, but alive. He remembered Emma's words just minutes ago. "This is the best dinner ever." He promised himself she would not see it turn into her worst nightmare. Suddenly, the third man moved toward Daniel, swinging an arm. The restaurant gasped. Daniel stepped aside with smooth precision, catching the man's wrist midair. In a blink, the man was on the ground, his knife sliding across the polished floor with a screech. Gasps exploded around the room. The other two attackers froze for a second, shocked at how fast it had happened. Daniel stood tall now, his chest rising, his body calm and balanced. His face showed no fear, Only quiet strength. For the first time that night, Mr. Harris's eyes widened not at the men threatening him, but at the single father who had just revealed a hidden side of himself. Emma, peeking from under the table, whispered softly, "Daddy." Her voice was a mix of fear and awe, and the room, once heavy with terror, felt the shift. People leaned forward, hope sparking where fear had been. The fight was not over, but everyone knew, in that moment, that Daniel was not just a father. He was something more. A father's instinct. For a long moment, the restaurant was frozen. The sound of the knife scraping across the floor still echoed in the silence, as if the walls themselves could not believe what had just happened. A single father, ordinary to every eye, had disarmed a man twice his size with a movement so fast that most diners had not even seen it clearly. The man lay groaning on the ground, clutching his wrist. Chairs scraped as people pressed back further, torn between fear of the remaining attackers and awe at the stranger who now stood between danger and them. The tallest of the three men snarled, his teeth bared. "You don't know what you've done," he hissed, pointing at Daniel. "Stay out of this, or you'll regret it." Daniel's breathing was steady, his body loose yet ready. His mind was sharper than the knife that had just clattered away. He did not see himself as a hero, only as a father with one purpose: protect Emma. He spoke softly, his voice carrying more weight than any threat. "There are children here," he said, his eyes burning into the attackers. "Walk away before you do something you cannot undo." The second man barked a laugh, though his voice trembled. "You think you can scare us? You're nothing but a..." He lunged forward, swinging a fist. But again, Daniel's body moved with a fluid grace that spoke of years of training, hidden behind the quiet mask of an ordinary life. He sidestepped, caught the man's arm, and with a swift twist, sent him crashing into a table. Plates and glasses shattered, food flying across the floor. Diners gasped. Some even cheered under their breath. Emma, still under the table, clutched her teddy bear tighter, her eyes wide. She had always known her father was strong in ways words could not explain. But this was something she had never seen before. Her little heart pounded, torn between fear and pride. The restaurant had changed just minutes ago. It was a place of comfort and warmth. Now it felt like a battlefield. And yet, Daniel stood like a calm center in the storm. His posture was not wild, not desperate, only precise, controlled, unshakable. The tallest attacker cursed, dragging a knife from his belt. His voice boomed across the room. "I'll cut you down, hero. Then I'll finish the CEO." A murmur spread through the diners. Some cried softly, others prayed. The pianist at the corner had abandoned his seat, his hands trembling. Waiters crouched behind counters, and Mr. Harris, the powerful CEO, could only stare, his mind whirling. He was a man used to buying safety, used to walls of security and power. But tonight, his life was being saved not by money, not by status, by a stranger with a child. Daniel did not flinch at the glint of steel. His voice was low, calm, almost gentle. "You don't want to do this." But the man charged. The knife slashed through the air, aiming for Daniel's chest. Gasps filled the restaurant. Emma shut her eyes tight. Then faster than anyone could follow, Daniel stepped aside, catching the man's wrist mid-strike. His other hand gripped the man's shoulder, pulling him forward, and with one clean motion, he used the attacker's own weight against him. The man flew past Daniel, crashing against a pillar. The knife spun away, clattering harmlessly across the tiles. The crowd erupted in shouts. Some clapped, others shouted warnings, but everyone knew now. Daniel was no ordinary man. He was skilled, trained, every move precise, every strike measured. The last attacker, the one still standing after seeing his companions fall, hesitated. His hands shook, sweat beaded on his forehead. He looked around the room. Every eye was on him, every whisper condemning. The weight of fear pressed against him. And then his gaze met Daniel's. It was not the look of a fighter desperate for victory. It was not arrogance or fury. It was the steady gaze of a father protecting what he loved most. A gaze that said, "If you take one more step, I will stop you, no matter the cost." The man's breath caught. For the first time, he felt small. At the corner, Emma peeked out, her little voice barely carrying across the silence. "Daddy, please come back." Those words sank deeper than any knife. Daniel glanced at her, and in that instant, his heart softened. Everything he was doing, every risk, every movement was for her. He raised his chin toward the last attacker. His voice was firm, final, It ends now. Leave. The attacker's face twisted with anger, but fear overpowered pride. He spat on the floor, then dragged his injured friends up. Together, they stumbled toward the door. One shouted over his shoulder, "This isn't over," before vanishing into the cold night. The restaurant exhaled. A wave of relief spread like air rushing back into empty lungs. People clapped weakly, some cried openly. Waiters peeked out from hiding. A mother hugged her child tightly. Daniel stood still for a moment, breathing deeply, his fists slowly unclenching. The storm inside him quieted. He turned to Emma. She crawled out from under the table and ran straight into his arms, hugging him tight. He held her close, closing his eyes, whispering, "It's okay, baby, it's over." But deep inside, he knew it wasn't. He had revealed what he had hidden for so long. And not only had Emma seen it, the CEO had to Dotmer. Harris rose shakily from his chair. His voice carried across the room, full of shock and wonder. "Who are you?" Daniel said nothing. He only hugged his daughter tighter. And for everyone watching, one truth had become clear. This ordinary single father was anything but ordinary. The secret revealed at the restaurant was no longer the same place it had been at the start of the evening. Where there had once been laughter, there were now whispers. Where there had been clinking glasses, there was the sound of hurried breaths and racing hearts. Broken plates and spilled wine lay scattered across the floor, silent evidence of the chaos that had passed. But in the middle of it all, Daniel stood tall, holding Emma in his arms. His shirt was rumpled, his hands still tense from the fight, but his eyes were calm again, softened by the little girl who clung to him. Every pair of eyes in the room was fixed on him. Some stared in awe, others in disbelief. How had a man who looked so ordinary, just a tired father in a worn shirt, done what trained security could not? Mr. Harris, the CEO, remained standing near his overturned chair. His chest rose and fell sharply, his face pale, but his eyes sharp with curiosity. Slowly, he stepped forward. His expensive shoes crunched against broken glass. He looked at Daniel as though seeing a riddle come alive. "You," Mr. Harris began, his voice still shaky, "you saved my life." "Who are you?" Daniel did not answer. He lowered his gaze to Emma, brushing her hair back gently. To him, she mattered more than any recognition or praise. She was his reason for everything. But silence only deepened the mystery. A waiter, still trembling, whispered to another. He moved like a soldier. "No," the other replied softly, like something more. The word spread. The diners, still shaken, began to murmur among themselves. They replayed what they had seen, how fast Daniel moved, how precise his actions were. Some had barely blinked before one of the attackers was already on the ground. It was not luck, not chance. It was skill. And with skill came questions. Dotmer. Harris cleared his throat, stepping closer. He lowered his voice so only Daniel could hear. "You don't work here. You're not part of my security. So tell me, where did you learn to fight like that?" Daniel finally looked at him. His eyes were steady, neither proud nor ashamed. He answered simply, "I learned because I had to." That was all. No details, no explanation. The CEO frowned, unsatisfied, but something in Daniel's tone told him not to push further. It wasn't arrogance, it was a quiet finality. Meanwhile, Emma tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, are you hurt?" she asked in a trembling voice. Daniel knelt down, cupping her face gently. "No, sweetheart, I'm okay." She studied him for a moment, as if trying to understand what she had just seen. To her, Daddy was the man who packed her lunch, who tucked her in at night, who told her bedtime stories. But tonight, she had seen another side, something powerful, something almost frightening. Yet even in that, she saw the same thing she had always known, love. He had done it for her. Emma leaned into his chest, and Daniel kissed the top of her head. Around them, the restaurant slowly returned to life. Staff hurried to clean broken glass. Some customers began leaving, their nerves to shaking to stay, but others lingered, their eyes still on Daniel. They wanted to thank him, to shake his hand, to know more. Yet no one dared to approach too closely. The pianist, who had hidden behind his instrument during the fight, returned to his seat. His hands trembled as he touched the keys, playing a soft tune to soothe the silence. But even the music carried a different weight now. It felt like a song after a storm, fragile but hopeful. Mr. Harris finally straightened his jacket, trying to gather back some of the power he had lost. He looked at Daniel again. this time with more respect than curiosity. You didn't just protect me, the CEO admitted, his voice louder now for others to hear. You protected everyone here. You stood up when no one else could. That is not something I will forget. His words rippled through the room. Heads nodded. People whispered. Some even clapped softly, their gratitude spilling out in nervous applause. But Daniel shook his head. His voice was quiet, almost tired. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because my daughter was here. I would not let her see the world break without standing up to it. The words hit everyone harder than a shout ever could. They were simple, but they carried truth. People saw him not just as a fighter, but as a father who had chosen courage for the sake of his child. Yet beneath the respect, something else stirred knees. The attackers had fled, but their parting words still lingered. This isn't over. Daniel knew it, too. His instincts told him the fight tonight was only the beginning. By stepping in, he had painted a target on himself, and Mr. Harris knew it as well, because men who attacked a CEO in public were not the kind to give up after one failure. The CEO studied Daniel one last time before turning to his bodyguards. His voice was sharp now, filled with command. Get the police. Find out who those men were. The guards rushed to obey, but before the CEO left, he looked at Daniel again. You say you did this only for your daughter. Maybe that's true. But men like you, they don't just appear in quiet corners. They're made. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. I don't know your past, Mr. Daniel. He answered simply, Daniel. Harris repeated, as though testing the name. Well, speak again. And with that, the CEO walked away, leaving Daniel with Emma in his arms, surrounded by whispers, stares, and the weight of a secret he had never wanted to reveal. The chandelier still glowed above, but the evening's innocence was gone. In its place stood something new, a tension, a curiosity, a sense that this single father was more than he appeared, and Daniel knew, deep down, that peace would not come so easily again. Whispers in the night, the restaurant's golden glow spilled onto the dark street outside. The cold air was sharp, carrying the sound of sirens in the distance as police cars rushed toward the scene. Inside, the last claps of gratitude had faded, replaced with hurried conversations and clinking glass as waiters tried to piece the room back together. But Daniel was already leaving. He carried Emma in his arms, her head resting on his shoulder. She was quiet now, exhausted by fear. Though her wide eyes stayed open, she kept glancing at her father's face, as if searching for answers she didn't know how to ask. They stepped out into the night. The city lights glimmered on wet pavement, reflections trembling like broken glass. For a moment, the world seemed still, just a father and daughter walking away from a storm. But Daniel knew better. Storms did not end so easily. Behind him, the heavy restaurant doors opened again. Mr. Harris emerged, flanked by his bodyguards. His suit jacket was torn, his face pale, but his voice carried the authority of a man not used to silence. Daniel, he called. Daniel stopped but did not turn immediately. He pressed Emma closer, then slowly faced the CEO. You can't just walk away, Harris said. Those men, they'll be back. They don't forgive. Tonight, they failed. Next time, they won't. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's not my fight. I only stepped in because my daughter was here. I don't owe you anything. Harris's eyes narrowed. You think they'll only come for me? You embarrassed them. You exposed them. That makes you a target, too. Do you really think they'll forget your face? The words hit Daniel harder than he expected. He knew Harris was right. The attackers had seen him, had felt his skill. Men like that did not swallow humiliation. They spat it back with violence. Emma stirred, lifting her head. Her voice was soft. Daddy, are we in danger? Daniel kissed her forehead gently. No, baby. Daddy won't let anything happen to you. His voice was steady, but inside, fear gnawed at him. The sirens grew louder. Police cars screeched to a halt near the curb. Officers spilled out, rushing into the restaurant. Harris stepped closer to Daniel, lowering his voice. You don't want thanks. I can see that. But you need protection. I can arrange it. I can make sure they never touch you or your daughter. Daniel shook his head. Protection always comes with a price, and I don't want my little girl growing up in someone else's shadow. We'll be fine on our own for the first time. Harris looked almost frustrated. He was a man who could buy anything, command anything, but here stood someone who could not be bought. That, more than anything, made Daniel different. Fine, Harris said sharply. But when they come back and they will remember this moment, remember I offered. Daniel gave no reply. He turned away, his boots crunching on the pavement as he carried Emma toward the bus stop down the street. Across the road, hidden in the shadows of an alley, the three attackers huddled together. The tallest one clutched his bruised shoulder, his face twisted with rage. "We should have finished it," he spat. "We'll finish it soon." The second replied, his voice dark. "That man, Daniel, he made us look weak." "Nobody makes us look weak." The third, still nursing his injured wrist, muttered, "Forget the CEO. He's rich. He's always guarded. But the father, he has a weakness." His eyes glinted with cruel satisfaction. The girl, they fell silent, their breaths steaming in the cold night. The fight was over, but the war had only just begun. Back at the bus stop, Daniel sat with Emma on his lap. The bench was cold, the streetlights buzzing faintly. Emma leaned against him, her small hand gripping his shirt. "Daddy," she whispered, "why did you fight them? You could have been hurt." Daniel looked down at her, his throat tightening. How could he explain? How could he tell her that the world was full of people who would harm others for greed, and that sometimes standing still was more dangerous than standing up? "I fought because I had to," he said simply, "because you were there. Because if someone wants to hurt people, someone else has to stop them." Emma was quiet for a moment, her little brow furrowed. Then she asked softly, "Were you a hero tonight?" Daniel's eyes stung. He kissed her hair and whispered, "No, sweetheart, just your dad." But deep inside, he knew the truth was heavier. His past, the training he thought he had left behind, the instincts he swore never to use again, they had all returned tonight, and the world had noticed. The bus arrived with a groan of brakes. Daniel stepped on, carrying Emma, and found a seat. By the window, the city slid past in a blur of neon and darkness. Emma's breathing grew steady as she finally fell asleep against his chest. Daniel stared out into the night, his reflection looking back at him through the glass. Ordinary face, tired eyes, but behind them, a secret. Tonight, that secret had been revealed. And though he had saved lives, he had also invited danger into their dot as the bus rattled on. Daniel whispered to himself, his voice low and heavy with, "Promise, they'll never touch you, Emma, not while I'm breathing." And in the dark streets behind them, unseen eyes were already watching. Shadows followed bus rattled through the city, its old engine groaning as it climbed the quiet streets. Neon lights flashed through the window signs of diners, bars, and shops closing for the night. Inside, most passengers sat half asleep, rocking gently with emotion. But Daniel did not rest. He sat stiff and alert, his arms wrapped protectively around Emma, who slept against his chest. Her little breasts warmed his shirt, her fingers still curled into his collar. To her, the world was safe again, but Daniel's eyes scanned every shadow outside, every figure at a street corner, every pair of headlights trailing the close. His instincts, awakened after years of silence, refused to let him relax. He had revealed himself tonight, and the moment he did, the past he had buried began to rise. The bus hissed to a stop. A group of strangers climbed aboard, laughing loudly, their boots heavy on the metal floor. Daniel's eyes flicked toward them immediately. He studied their movements, their eyes, their hands, ordinary men, drunk and harmless. But his mind no longer gave anyone the benefit of the doubt. Emma stirred in her sleep. Daniel stroked her hair gently, whispering, "It's okay, baby, Daddy's here." The bus rolled on. But outside, unseen, a black car glided down the same road, its lights dimmed. Inside sat the three men from the restaurant. Their injuries were fresh, their pride wounded deeper. The tallest one clenched his fists. "We should have ended him right there." The second shook his head. "No, not yet. Let him feel safe. Then we take what he loves most. He'll wish he had never crossed us." And the third, his voice like a whisper of poison, added, "The girl, she's the key." Their car followed, slow and silent. At last, Daniel carried Emma off the bus. Their small apartment building stood on a quiet street, the bricks worn, the staircase creaking. A single light flickered above the entrance. It was not much, but it was home inside. Daniel laid Emma gently on her bed. She clutched her teddy bear, sighing in her sleep, unaware of the storm outside. Daniel sat at her bedside for a long while, watching her chest rise and fall. He felt both peace and dread: peace because she was safe tonight, dread because safety was fragile. breakable, temporary. He whispered, more to himself than her, "You're my whole world, and I'll protect you, no matter what it costs me." Knock broke the silence. Daniel rose instantly, his body tense. He moved to the door quietly, his hand hovering over the knob. Another knock came, louder this time. "Daniel," a voice called softly. It was Mr. Harris. Daniel opened the door a crack. The CEO stood there in his expensive coat, the bodyguards lingering behind him. His face looked calmer now, but his eyes still carried the weight of what had happened earlier. "I shouldn't be here," Harris admitted, "but I had to find you." Daniel frowned. "You followed me." "Yes," Harris said bluntly, "and I'm glad I did. You don't understand. The kind of men you crossed tonight, they won't stop. They'll find you, and when they do, your daughter will be in danger." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I know. That's why I don't want you here. You'll only drag more attention to us." But Harris shook his head. "No, you dragged attention to yourself the moment you stood up in that restaurant. Don't you see? You've stepped into a fight that belongs to men like me, and now, whether you want it or not, you're part of it." Daniel almost closed the door, but Harris's next words froze him. "I can protect her," the CEO said firmly, nodding toward Emma's room. "You may not trust me, but I have resources you don't. Men, money, walls of steel. Alone, you're vulnerable. With me, she's untouchable." Daniel's eyes darkened. "She doesn't need your world. She needs me." Harris sighed, frustration heavy in his voice. "You think love alone can shield her? Love is not bulletproof, Daniel." The words struck hard. For a moment, Daniel looked away, his throat tight. He had built his whole life on the promise that love was enough, but tonight, he had seen the cracks. Before he could answer, movement flickered outside the window. A shadow darted across the street, too quick to be casual. Daniel's instincts flared. He grabbed Harris by the arm, pulling him inside, and slammed the door shut. "Get away from the window," Daniel ordered. His voice was low but sharp, the voice of a man who had lived with danger before. The bodyguards stiffened, reaching for their weapons. Harris's eyes widened. "They're here?" Daniel's gaze scanned the shadows beyond the curtains. His pulse slowed, his body shifting into that calm readiness again. "Yes," he whispered. "They never left." Inside Emma's room, the little girl stirred, clutching her teddy bear tighter as if she could sense the unease. Daniel glanced at her door, his heart splitting into half in fear, half in determination. He turned back to Harris. His voice was steel. "Listen to me. I don't care about your money or your offers. But if those men cross that door, if they even try to touch my daughter, then they will never walk away again." Harris studied him for a long moment, and for the first time, the powerful CEO looked at Daniel not as an ordinary father, not even as a rescuer, but as a man forged in something he did not yet understand. The night outside grew darker. The whispers in the alley grew closer. The war was not waiting for tomorrow. It had already begun.